Watch closely how Bobby Fischer is able to use clear strategic plans and a knowledge of exactly where to place his pieces to get an incredible position against Lajos Portisch, a Hungarian grandmaster and a legendary player in his own right. This game was played in 1966 at Santa Monica. Portisch has white, Fischer has black, and watch how Fischer handles this position. Really clear and very brilliant. Portisch begins with d4. Fischer plays knight to f6, c4, and a surprise move from Fischer. He plays e6. Normally he would play g6 and fianchetto on the king's side with a King's Indian defense or even a Grunfeld. But here Fischer plays e6, Portisch plays knight to c3, and now bishop to b4. It's all about this e4 square. The knight controls it, this knight defends it, but now bishop to b4 pins the knight. So it's all a battle over this e4 square at the moment. e3, b6. The idea, again, is to play bishop to b7 and lend some control over e4. Here, knight g to e2 from white. And one of the reasons is that one of black's main strategies is to take this knight and create doubled pawns and have a pawn weakness, particularly on the c4 square. So by playing knight g to e2, Portisch is saying, well, if you take my knight, I'm going to retake it with my other knight and avoid any pawn structure damage. But Fischer notices that this knight is blocking the bishop at f1. And that means this pawn at c4 is undefended. So bishop to a6, he immediately attacks that pawn. And here the main move is a3 to remove that pin. But here Portisch goes ahead and plays knight to g3 immediately. And he's trying to get some pressure on the king's side, maybe play e4 and break and maybe gain some space. But that move, of course, allows the pawn at c4 to be defended, but it also allows this move. Bishop takes c3 check. And after pawn retakes, we have the damage to the structure that black wanted in the Nimzo-Indian to begin with. And it's not just the doubled pawns that are the issue. This square c4 is a particular problem for white in these structures. And black, in an ideal world, will play knight c6, a5, and eventually land on this c4 square. That's sort of the ultimate goal for black in this position, to get that knight on c4, very strong. d5 is played, taking advantage of this pressure along this diagonal. If the bishops are exchanged, black would lose the right to castle. If cd5, bishop takes, king f1, ed5, and this is a pretty good structure for black. Now, if white still had the light squared bishop, he could be happy with this position. But without that light squared bishop, black is doing quite well. So Portisch instead plays queen to f3, creating a counterpin along this diagonal. If the pawn moves, the rook would drop. Fischer goes ahead and castles. And now, if cd5, Fischer would have to retake, because if he plays bishop f1, white could play de6, and the queen hits the rook. This bishop still hangs, and white would be better. But instead of that, Portisch goes ahead and plays e4, breaking in the center. Pawn takes, knight takes, and these pieces get exchanged. And Fischer's rook is under attack at the moment. Now, to just look at it, it looks like white has a lot of attacking potential. Moves like bishop to d3. This bishop can come to f4 or g5. The problem is these rooks are behind in development. You need to get these rooks involved for an attack to really have some teeth to it. Fischer plays the move queen to d7, which it looks like he's hanging this rook at a8, right? But he's not. The idea is after queen takes a8, he would play knight to c6. And yes, Portisch would get 2 rooks for the queen, but this is still a great position for black. The knight is going to go to a5, eventually land on c4. And with the rook still on their starting squares and no completely open files, the queen would be very strong in that position. So instead, Portisch plays bishop to a3, putting the bishop on a nice diagonal, gaining a tempo against the rook at f8, rook to e8. Now bishop to d3, threatening checkmate. Right now, this f8 square is controlled by this bishop. But one of the ideas behind queen to d7 in the first place was to play this next move, f5. Gaining space, blocking that diagonal. Yes, it creates a weakness at e6 and a square at e5, but Fischer's okay with that. he's really neutralizing the attacking potential of white's position. The best move for white is probably just to play queen to f3 and keep the tension, but Portisch just couldn't resist, and he goes ahead and does take that rook, allowing knight to c6, queen takes rook check, queen takes queen, and castles. So Fischer now, with queen against the two rooks, gets to work on this c4 square. And he's able to do that immediately. At first sight, this might look okay for white. He's got the bishop pair and the two rooks for the queen, but black is clearly better here with the queen's ability to become active and a clear plan to attack c4. Fischer begins immediately with knight to a5, the bishop and knight attacking c4, rook a to e1. Portisch puts pressure on the backward pawn. Then bishop takes c4, bishop takes, and knight takes. And just look at a comparison of these two minor pieces. This knight is so much better than this bishop that it's almost enough to win on its own. It's that good. And it's almost impossible for white to even get at this knight. It can just sit there forever, and it's a very strong piece for Fischer. And knights and queens work well together because they do different things and they don't get in each other's way. So Fischer's got a good position. Bishop goes back to c1. It was under attack. c5, gaining space. Pawn takes, bishop to f4, h6. Fischer begins to gain space on the king side. Rook to e2. Portisch planning to double against the weakness at e6. g5 hits the bishop, bishop to e5. Queen to d8, activating the queen on the open d file. Rook f to e1, again doubling up, increasing the pressure on e6. But now king to f7, adding a defender to that pawn. h3. And f4, and we see this bishop, it looks strong, but it's starting to lose squares. It doesn't have any place really to go at the moment. King to h2 from Portisch. a6, Fischer noticed that little move. He just takes a pawn that's on a dark square where it can be attacked by this bishop and just moves it to a light square. Very simple. Rook to e4, directly attacking this knight. Portisch wants that knight to move. It is such a strong piece. So how does Fischer avoid moving that knight and keep it strong on that square? Queen to d5. The queen supports the knight and keeps it firmly entrenched on the beautiful c4 square. Now here Portisch plays h4, trying to work on this kingside pawn structure, but this is actually a mistake. And Fischer exploits this mistake with a nice tactic. Can you see it? That's right. He uses the beautiful knight at c4 and plays knight to e3, an interference motif tactically by interfering with the rook's defense of each other. And now the queen is threatening to just take this rook on e4. You might ask, well, what if he plays f3 and just defends that rook with the pawn instead? The problem is then queen to d2, and there's a threat of mate on g2, and after rook to g1 to defend against that mate, then queen to f2 with threats of queen to h4 mate, and white's position just completely falls apart. So he has to give up the material. Rook takes e3, pawn takes rook, rook takes e3. So now they're an equal number of pawns, but now it's queen versus rook and bishop. And the queen is very strong here. This pawn is under attack, and Fischer's able to grab it. So now he's up a pawn in addition to queen versus the bishop and rook. He's threatening the f2 pawn right now. So rook to f3 check to protect that pawn. King to e8. Bishop to g7, going after the h6 pawn. The queen comes back to c4, threatening to play queen takes h4 check. So pawns are exchanged at g5. Rook to f8 check, king to d7, rook to a8, but then king to c6. And in this position, Portisch, with the white pieces, went ahead and resigned. And the reason is he has no chance of even drawing this game. This passed a pawn is huge. The king's just going to come to b7, kick this rook away. This pawn's going to advance. And the queen can, there's all kinds of potential double checks in all of the lines where it can check white's king. And I mean, he just has no chance. So in this position, Portisch resigned. Interesting to see, Fischer zeroed in on that c4 square, one minor piece, and that was enough to win the game against a legendary grandmaster. I hope you've enjoyed this masterpiece. See you again soon at Chess Dog.